Hello and welcome to this David Icke Connector videocast. Well, every day we see stories of events, happenings, decisions in the newspapers, in television news bulletins and on the internet. And they are overwhelmingly, almost entirely, given to us as individual, in and of themselves, happenings or decisions. So we are asked to see them in and of themselves. And when you do that, these happenings, they look a certain way. But when you realize that the society changing decisions are not random and certainly not in and of themselves, but part of a much bigger plan or blueprint, then those apparently random individual events, decisions, take on a very, very different light, because there is a blueprint and it's unfolding in front of our eyes day after day, but most people don't see it because they don't see the connections which allows them to see the blueprint. They just see the individual happenings. And when you see the connections and you see the blueprint, the world looks very, very different. And of course, what appears to be happening is that elected politicians are making these decisions that are pushing this blueprint on. And so you might think, well, all these politicians have got to be in on it then. No, they haven't. Look at political leaders, and some of them are in on it, but not the great majority. They're just clueless, being played like a stringed instrument by those that, unlike the politicians, don't come and go in and out of government, but are always there, the permanent government, including the administration of government. And so the politicians come and the politicians go pretty soon, just a few years maximum. And they are making decisions on things they have no idea about. So what drives their decisions? Well, they're advisors and experts that are put around them. So if you take an example of what they call a government or cabinet reshuffle, what does this mean? It means that some guy who knows nothing about the environment except what he's been told by his advisors and civil servants, as we call them in Britain, he is, say, head of the, like I say, environment department, knowing nothing about the environment. Then they have a reshuffle. The Prime Minister decides that they're going to all move about like musical chairs. So this guy or woman who is head of environment now moves to health, say. And she, who knew nothing about the environment except what his department permanent staff told him, now moves to the health department, and he knows nothing, or she knows nothing about health except what the permanent staff in the department have told him or her. And so these people who appear to them to be making these decisions that are pushing this blueprint forward are not making them at all. They're just puppets, vehicles, middlemen and women between those that were driving the blueprint and bringing them the elements of it into reality through law changes and legislation. And I'm going to give you an example today of how, when you connect the dots, apparently totally unconnected decisions are actually fundamentally connected. Because the British government, and I say the British government, but this applies to everywhere else in the world because it's a global agenda. The British government has announced this week two things that appear to be about as far apart as you could possibly get. One, they say they are seriously considering mandatory vaccinations. And when they say they are seriously considering it, what they're really saying is we're going to introduce it, brackets, because it's part of this blueprint for the world. And another announcement was that in a very short time, we are going to have driverless vehicles on the roads of Britain. And same is happening in the United States and elsewhere. Mandatory vaccinations, driverless vehicles, and they're connected? What? But they are. When you see the scale of the blueprint, you realize that all these society-changing decisions are connected. So, in terms of mandatory vaccinations, the blueprint of total human control globally, control of mind, control of emotions, control of health, connects into almost everything. So, mandatory vaccinations. Part of this blueprint is the transformation of the human body by manipulating DNA. There are deep esoteric reasons for this, which go into the books, but that's one of the real key reasons why they want access to the body. And what gives access to the body more obviously than vaccinations, especially when you're giving them to newborn children and all the way through their childhood and body-mind developing years. We should not underestimate either the power of toxic cocktails put in the body via vaccinations affecting the mind. So many of the, quote, physical effects of vaccinations and diseases and problems that come from vaccinations are related to the brain. And you may have noticed the brain is where we process information and thus come to perceptions of events and even perceptions of reality itself. So vaccinations give this death cult cabal that's actually behind this blueprint access to the body to affect the mind and to affect human health. Imagine bombarding newborn babies and kids through their childhood, where their immune systems are still developing, with a tidal wave of toxic shite. the number of which is increasing all the time for reasons I'll come to, or one of the reasons I'll come to. Those immune systems which protect us from threats to the body, and indeed the mind, those immune systems will never be what they could be for the entirety of that child's life because of the bombardment that it is subjected to. And access to the body via vaccinations, for many and various reasons, they're just a few, also connects into access to the body via AI and microchips, because the idea, they're even talking openly about it in the crazy world of Silicon Valley, which is owned by this death cult cabal I'm exposing. The plan is, around 2030, if not earlier, to connect the human brain to AI. So AI, artificial intelligence, which the cabal controls, will become the human mind, human thought, human perception. And that is part of something called the smart grid. You'll have noticed how almost everything these days that comes out has the word smart in front of it. Whether it's technology or it's ways of doing things, they're called smart, all of them. Why? Because they're all connected to this planned, unfolding, as we speak, smart grid, part of which connects into the human mind via AI, and AI will run the whole smart grid. This means that AI will control all technology, and it's part of a colossal control system to control every aspect of human life and human society. And one aspect of this smart grid, to which, like I say, vaccinations connect into, that's why they want them mandatory, everyone must have them, is driverless cars. And driverless cars are there so that the vehicle you travel around in is controlled by AI. You don't have the ability to make a decision to drive where you want, because you'll only be allowed to go where the computer system on the driverless car decides that you can go. I'll come a bit more into that later. But I want to look through this whole thing first of mandatory vaccinations, because this is now a common theme gathering around the world, not least in the United States. Places like California and many other states of America are either introducing or in the process of introducing forms of mandatory vaccination. And like I say, the reason is that you must be given no choice about being vaccinated and your kids being vaccinated, because this is part of an agenda that insists that everyone must be vaccinated for a much bigger unspoken reason. And the plan in the end is to have not just mandatory vaccinations, but mandatory drugging of the population to dumb them down. And for that drugging to be tracked to make sure you've had your dose of the day, if you like. And this concept was very well portrayed in a movie in 2002 called Equilibrium, where the population had to take suppressing, dumbing down drugs every day, and whether they had taken them or not was tracked. This is why we're moving to this whole concept of smart drugs. Smart drugs where you're given a prescription by the doctor, and then your smart phone then alerts you to the fact that it's time to take the drug. This is why we're having smart pills with microchips in them, which are also being introduced. It's a stepping stone, what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, to this situation eventually of the compulsory drugging of the population and tracking to make sure that you've been drugged. And there's an organization called Gavi, which it's called the Vaccine Alliance. It's funded massively by people like Bill Gates, when anything he funds is a massive red flag and flashing red lights. And they are involved in developing technologies to track children to make sure they've been vaccinated. See, this is all connected. I'll come to that in a second, but I want to tell you a story. As a once famous British comedian used to say. In the 1990s, I was in America, and I was approached by a third party to ask if I would meet a CIA scientist who wanted to talk to me because he wanted information out that, for reasons that became obvious, he couldn't circulate himself. So I went to see him and spent the evening with him and his family. And he told me about the fact that he was working for the CIA because he was being forced to. And I said, well, basically, how are they forcing you to? And he told me the story that he had joined the CIA and he thought he was serving his country. And then when he got on the inside, he realized that this whole conspiracy that I've been exposing for 30 years was real. And what was really going on. And so he started to rebel against it. He said, I'm not working for you. And he said, just after that, when he'd said no more, he left his home and then he has missing time. He eventually wakes up on a medical type bench in a room. And he realizes something stuck to his chest. And he was just opening his shirt as he was telling me this story. And what he found on his chest and what I saw when I met him was like a see-through shampoo sachet type thing. And inside was this orangey golden liquid. And he said, this is how they force me. And he described how his body had been manipulated to need this drug to survive, and if he didn't get it, he would die a very unpleasant death. And he said that at one point he called their bluff, if you like, and realized they weren't kidding, because that's what happened. And he obviously said, okay, I'll work for you again. And these patches, as they're called on the inside, someone's been patched, they have to be replaced every 72 hours. And if they're not replaced, then he starts to die. And he said there were a long, long list of people that the CIA and connected agencies wanted to work for them because of their expertise, who didn't want to work for this cabal, but the patches made sure they did. Anyway, that's the background to the guy I met. But he told me something very interesting, and this was 1997, when no one was talking about nanotechnology. But he said to me, you know, they're putting microchips into people, nano microchips, which are now in the public arena. They're known as smart dust. They're putting nano microchips into people to connect them to technology, basically. Well, what we would call now AI. And he said, do you know how they're getting them into people's bodies? Vaccination programs. And you see, the vast majority of people who are driving this agenda by their daily actions have no idea there is an agenda or a blueprint. The person who puts the stuff in the needle into a child or anyone else has no idea what's in there. And very few people have to know for the whole population to be, or overwhelmingly the whole population, to be vaccinated with this stuff. So the reason for mandatory vaccinations, nothing to do with human health. People lower down might think it is. Clueless politicians might be persuaded it is because they know no better, just repeaters. But the real reason is not about human health, it's about human control. And I mentioned this Gavi organization, funded by Bill Gates and the usual suspects, including governments. And they're going along the route of technological tracking of kids to make sure they've been vaccinated. Here's the story: fingerprint records and digital health cards to help solve global identity crisis. Digital health cards, biometric records, text message birth alerts, and a mobile digital identity platform that can work entirely offline are being supported by Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. The Vaccine Propaganda Organization would be rather more accurate. Gavi is closely connected to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, otherwise known as the Forum of the Less Than 1%. The same World Economic Forum in Davos to which Greta Thunberg was invited to make her statement about the fact we're all gonna die because of climate change, which is being driven by this same death cult to justify the imposition of elements of this same blueprint for humanity. And Gavi is working to identify proven technologies that could accelerate and improve immunization coverage and delivery by improving the formal identity registration and verification of children in developing countries. I don't think it's going to stay in developing countries either. Dr. Seth Barkley, CEO of Gavi, said they want to have a digital identification of every child to ensure they receive vaccines. Among their plans are a digital health card technology allowing frontline health workers to electronically register and track health services, track people, in other words, and children. A mobile solution that sends the details of every newborn baby's birth to a government health worker via coded SMS. Don't let any of them escape from it. The moment there's a birth, ping, hey, on your way, chaps. A biometric innovation that solves challenges to immunization coverage by linking children to health records through their fingerprints. It's all a conspiracy, don't worry about it. Or not a conspiracy, it's all a nonsense. Just a conspiracy theory. We are thrilled to receive this recognition. Rebecca Disler, Director of Global Health Initiatives at a company called Element, working with Gavi to create the first biometric platform capable of following a person from birth to old age. I have been warning for so long that this was coming. The tracking 24/7 of every man, woman, and child from cradle to grave. And this mandatory vaccination scam and this driverless vehicle scam are connected to it. Support from Gavi will allow us to explore how mobile delivery of biometric ID can transform the way we deliver vaccines by meeting people where they are on devices in their hands. Seth Barkley, by the way, is very well paid by Gavi, which is funded by Gates and all these corporations and governments. According to one story here, he's taken home more than £2 million over the past 4 years as executive officer or chief executive officer of the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, Gavi. Mandatory vaccinations are not about what they appear to be. I've also written in my books over the years about a man called Dr. Richard Day. Dr. Richard Day was a big time Rockefeller insider and death cult insider. He was connected to Planned Parenthood, which started out life with Rockefeller support as a eugenics organization, openly. And he addressed a meeting of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1969, and shocked everybody by asking them to turn off recording equipment and not take notes, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change, because what he represented was basically going to change it. And in a book called Phantom Self, I set out in some detail what he said that night. It's staggering when you see what has happened since and you compare that with what he said was going to happen. They are mirrors of each other, even in detail. And one of the things he said was that they were going to inoculate diseases into people via vaccinations. So this whole idea that it's about the health of children is a load of old crap. Another thing it's about is manipulating the state of DNA, which is what the stuff in vaccinations can do. So this is the origin of the story that led me to go with this subject this week. Parents may be forced to give children vaccinations. Minister says there's a strong argument for compulsory jabs. No, there is not. Please give me a better definition of fascism, better than you have no say anymore in what goes into your body and into your child's body. No say. The government dictates what you will be injected with. It's fascism. And you know, I was listening. I mean, the media are so pathetic. It's breathtaking. When this came out, I was listening in the car to a talk radio station in Britain. And the presenter was talking about this subject that had just been announced. And he said, oh yeah, well, you can't go to school if you're not vaccinated. Well, that's fair enough, isn't it? Well, actually, mate, it's not fair enough. It's fascism. Because make no mistake, you can't go to school if you're not vaccinated is only a stepping stone to you can't refuse vaccination no matter if you're going to school or not. Anyway, here's the story. The health secretary argued yesterday that there is a very strong argument for making vaccinations compulsory for children. Matt Hancock said he had sought advice from experts over the past few days on how to introduce mandatory jabs. Now, for the background to this, see what I said earlier. Matt Hancock is the health secretary. What does he know about health and vaccinations? Bugger all. He's an economist. Oh, just what you need to be kind of trained in if you want to be health secretary. Before he was health secretary, he was Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And now, reshuffle, he's pontificating on whether children in Britain should be forced to have vaccinations. And he says there is a strong argument. Brackets, that's what I've been told by the permanent government that's driving this blueprint globally. Official figures last week showed a fall in the uptake of all 13 routine childhood vaccinations, including MMR, polio, and diphtheria. The rates for MMR had dropped for the 5th year in a row, with 14% of children not receiving the 2 necessary jabs. And this is how choice works, you see. If you choose to do what the state wants you to do, you have choice. But if you choose not to do what the state wants you to do, then that choice has to be taken away and what they want you to do has to become mandatory. So, as more parents have looked at this and gone, well, hold on a minute, I'm not so sure I'm being told the truth here about vaccines. And what about the potential effect on my children? My sons haven't been vaccinated. 2 strapping blokes who didn't have a problem with childhood diseases. Funny that, isn't it? You know why? because their immune system's on fire, because it hasn't been deluged with toxic shite from the time they were born. Hancock said, for it is he, I think there's a very strong argument for a movement towards compulsory vaccination. I've just been told. And I think the public would back us. Well, those without half a brain cell on active duty, who just believe whatever they're told, would back you. The public with a brain in working order would check it out themselves and go, hold on a minute. I'm not sure I'm being told the truth here. I received advice. Oh, I bet you bloody did. I received advice inside government this week. Permanent government, he should have said. On how we might go about it, and I'm looking seriously at it. He said parents who did not vaccinate their own children were putting other vulnerable youngsters at risk. The usual bollocks to demonise parents who can think for themselves. The worst thing is, if you don't vaccinate your child, then the person you are putting at risk is not only your own child, but it's also the child who can't be vaccinated for medical reasons. You horrible people. Brackets complete bollocks. Then I want to make it very easy for when the children arrive at school and aren't vaccinated to get vaccinated and make it the norm. Hey, you want to talk to Gavi, mate, and Bill Gates. I think social media companies have got a lot to answer for, he said. Why, pray? They allow the spread of anti-vaccine messages. I will do whatever I can. Yeah, to silence anyone who's questioning what you want people to believe, or what you're told to want people to believe. I doubt you've thought it through, Mr. Economist, health man. The science is absolutely clear and settled on the importance of vaccinations. No, it's not. That's the scam again. The science is settled when it's not. Vaccinations, climate change, the science is settled. So shut up and do what you're told. So now we have California making childhood vaccinations compulsory 2 years ago. Parents who refuse to comply can't enroll their children at school. Good. Two birds with one stone, that, innit? You don't get shite in your body, and you don't get programmed at school. Everyone's a winner. And of course, it's going on more and more all around the world, so it's obviously not a staggering surprise to find that the British government is now on board with it. The way they play this is to have dire warnings about childhood diseases. We're all going to die, brackets, see climate change. Get them in fear, they'll do what you want. And that's kind of strange to me, because I was born in the 1950s. I know I may look young and virile, but actually, I was born in 1952, quite a long time ago. And we used to have childhood diseases. We used to have things like measles, mumps, and chickenpox, and things like that. And I never heard, when I was a kid, I never heard the word dangerous and these diseases in the same sentence. They were just part of childhood. Just get your week off school. Good. And I had all the vaccinations that were going in those days for all these diseases. And I got most of them. Something wrong somewhere. But now it's dire warnings, we're all going to die, because then they can demonize the parents who are not vaccinating their children as being the cause of it. And have you noticed, when you have these like a measles outbreak, like in New York, and they suddenly say compulsory vaccinations, $1,000 fine if you don't have your children vaccinated. They never ask the question, the media, of course they don't. How many of these kids in this, say, measles outbreak, how many have been vaccinated and how many haven't? And how come the kids, many of them, who've not been vaccinated, don't get the diseases like my sons? How many have been vaccinated, do get them, and why? And yet what we hear is, you're putting my child at risk because of not being vaccinated, when actually vaccinated kids, those who were vaccinated with live viruses, through something, I think they call it shedding, can pass on that to other kids, including non-vaccinated kids. So who's putting children in danger when you look at that? But the scam is herd immunity. Actually, the real problem is not herd immunity, it's herd mentality. That's the problem. But anyway, herd immunity. What they say is that a vast percentage of children, for instance, must be vaccinated to create herd immunity. But what they don't tell you, even if herd immunity in one form is a fact, is that it applies to those who have had the disease and got natural immunity. And then the more natural immunity you have, so the idea goes, the more you eradicate the disease in general. But natural immunity is very different from often the illusion of vaccinated immunity. Here's what this American neurosurgeon Russell Blaylock said about this subject. In the original description of herd immunity, the protection to the population at large occurred only if people contracted the infections naturally. The reason for this is that naturally acquired immunity lasts for a lifetime. The vaccine proponents quickly latched onto this concept and applied it to vaccine-induced immunity. But there was one major problem, he said. Vaccine-induced immunity lasted for only a relatively short period. I mean, sometimes if at all. And then this applies only to humoral body fluid immunity. This is why they began to suggest boosters for most vaccines, even the common childhood infections such as chickenpox, measles, mumps, and rubella. The reason, as he points out, that we have this, you need a booster, so you have all these repeated vaccinations, is because of the, at best, limited effect they have. And thus this whole diversion of herd immunity is the said load of bollocks. why have we had this explosion of more and more and more vaccinations in recent decades? I'll tell you. It goes back to 1986 when, wait for it, the US Congress gave immunity, herd immunity would be appropriate, immunity from prosecution of the drug companies making vaccines. So no matter what the vaccines did to kids and others, they could not be sued. Thus, they had and have no incentive whatsoever to go down the road of safety because they can't lose. As a result, more and more vaccines have been put on the market. Congress in 1986, and it was the decision that's been quoted by the US Supreme Court in 2011, declared vaccines to be unavoidably unsafe. And because they said they were unavoidably unsafe, they made the decision to give immunity from prosecution to the drug companies. Now, these unavoidably unsafe vaccines, which was used to justify immunity from prosecution for the drug companies, Big Pharma, are the same unavoidably unsafe vaccines that we are told are safe, thus they must be made mandatory. And that you must be forced to give unavoidably unsafe vaccines to your kids. So this shielded drug companies from all product liability. If your child, or you as well, are injured or die after vaccination, you cannot hold the drug company that makes and profits from the vaccine or anyone who regulates, promotes, administers, or mandates the vaccine accountable in a civil court of law in front of a jury of your peers. Big Pharma has so much influence on government policy, Washington is absolutely alive with pharmaceutical lobbyists running the show. That's why the politicians just parrot and repeat what they say, people like Hancock. And one of America's leading opponents of this Big Pharma vaccine narrative is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's the son of the US Attorney General during the Kennedy administration, who was assassinated, like his brother, in the 1960s. And Christina Kirsten is a writer on a Kennedy-connected website, and this is what she wrote. Following the passage of this immunity bill, the number of vaccines on the childhood schedule mushroomed, creating a gold rush for vaccine makers. The vaccine industry went from a $1 billion industry to a $50 billion industry. But this expansion in the vaccine industry, in fact, is relatively small in comparison to the even greater gold rush for the big four companies. The drug treatment side of the equation, which is substantially more lucrative than the gateway vaccine side of the big four, already monopolized by them, now has increased substantially. Now we're going to see just how callous this Big Pharma cabal is, as if we needed confirmation. The vaccine manufacturers began to capitalize on the known adverse effects of their vaccines and have since created drugs for the treatment side of the equation as well. The lack of incentive to make safe products, which created the bloated vaccine schedule, became the gateway to the lucrative drug treatment side for these companies. Today, the big four monopolize vaccines as well as the drug treatments for chronic illnesses known to be induced by vaccines. First, vaccines push kids off the cliff, then the vaccine makers profit from rescuing those they don't kill. Of course, the number of vaccines now that kids have is unbelievable, not least in America. And there's so many more in the pipeline to introduce. It's destroying the immune system of children and young people, and it will be like that for life. You come out of the womb and you're hit with this stuff now. And once you realize that behind it all is a death cult, you then realize that it's not about the health of children, but something very, very much more sinister. By the way, the vaccine court set up by the government to pay out on vaccine injuries and death instead of the drug companies paying out, as they were in large amounts up to the point where they were given immunity. That vaccine court, which has a very high bar of proving cause and effect between vaccines and effect in terms of health, it has so far paid out $4 billion in compensation. No wonder they said, officially, that vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. And the list in front of me here, I won't go through it, you can find it elsewhere, of health damage and death that's been connected to vaccines is absolutely staggering. Many of them affecting the brain. And are you surprised, as I will list some of the ingredients in various vaccinations of different kinds? They include aluminium, which is a known brain toxin, aborted fetal tissue, mercury-based thimerosal, gelatin, human serum albumin found in blood plasma, sorbitol and other stabilizers, emulsifiers, taste improvers, antibiotics, egg proteins, yeast proteins, formaldehyde, which is used to embalm dead bodies, acidity regulators, human cell strains, animal cell strains, and GMOs, recombinant DNA technology, bovine products. And so it goes on. What could possibly go wrong? And then there's this story of people who've been involved in the whole area of health and big pharma, who have come out and spoken publicly about what's really going on. It says here in this article, the truth, as explained by Dr. Marcia Angel, a physician and longtime editor-in-chief of the New England Medical Journal, one of the most prestigious peer-reviewed medical journals in the world alongside the Lancet, is that, quote, it is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published, or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians and authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. And Arnold Seymour, maybe that should be Seymour, I don't know, it reads Seymour Relman, a Harvard professor of medicine and also a former editor-in-chief of the New England Medical Journal, also made it quite clear that, quote, the medical profession is being bought by the pharmaceutical industry, not only in terms of the practice of medicine, but also in terms of the teaching and research. The academic institutions of this country are allowing themselves to be paid agents of the pharmaceutical industry. I think it's disgraceful. And so what you have are doctors and health secretaries and all the rest of the political class being nothing more than repeaters for the version of reality that suits the drug cartel, Big Pharma. Lest we forget, a Big Pharma cabal that makes its vast profits not from people being healthy, but from people being sick. And I'll just finish on this subject with something else to focus the mind on the effect and knock-on effect of mandatory vaccinations. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes used forced vaccination laws to justify forced sterilization laws. Brackets. See eugenics, which the Rockefeller family funded, by the way, eugenics. Do you know the Rockefeller family funded Hitler's race purity expert, Ernst Rudin? Anyone told you that? No. Not at school, they won't. And that's what's behind so much of this stuff. It's what's behind vaccinations, ultimately. Eugenics. And this is what he said in a court ruling, this psychopath Holmes. The principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover the cutting of fallopian tubes. This is the story. The horrifying case in 1927, Buck versus Bell, in which the Supreme Court ruled in an 8-1 decision that it was constitutional for Virginia to perform forced sterilization of its citizens. How many know that? It's been in my book since the 1990s about how America was performing sterilization on kids on the basis of their alleged IQ. America would never do that. No, of course they wouldn't. They wouldn't do it now, would they? Through various means. The decision of the United States Supreme Court, written by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., in which the court ruled that a state statute permitting compulsory sterilization of the unfit, including the intellectually disabled, quote, for the protection and health of the state, did not violate the due process clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And according to the story, the Supreme Court has never expressly overturned this ruling. This is what Psychopath Holmes said. We have seen more than once that the public welfare may call upon the best citizens for their lives. It would be strange if it could not call upon those who already sap the strength of the state for these lesser sacrifices, often not felt to be such by those concerned, to prevent our being swamped with incompetence. It is better for all the world. if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. No, this is not the Dark Ages. This is 1927. Dark enough, but you would think this mentality is not still around today. Are you joking? And he said, the principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Someone get Wendell Holmes a mirror, will you? So, mandatory vaccinations have so many knock-on effects because, like I keep saying, if people don't like where we are, well, you better get your asses off the sofa because this is only where we are. It's not where this is meant to go. And mandatory vaccinations are a stepping stone to other things as they're being used to justify eugenics, forced sterilization. So then, and I'll be brief on this bit, then we have something that appears to be completely unconnected to mandatory vaccinations. Driverless vehicles, but they're not. They're part of this web, this control web, this smart grid, and the manipulation of the human body in connecting it to this smart grid, not least through nano microchips, that is designed to control humanity in every way, not least by dictating their perceptions externally. So it was another government minister this week, another bloody expert. UK will have fully autonomous cars on roads in 3 to 4 years, minister says. Britain will see truly driverless cars on its roads in 3 or 4 years, and there will still be a role for diesel cars for many years, Transport Secretary Chris Grayling said on Monday. We are now rapidly approaching the era of the driverless car. Of course we are. It's been in the blueprint since way back. Chris Grayling told a Conservative Party conference, I expect the first truly driverless cars to be on our roads within 3 or 4 years. Grayling said he was committed to ending the sale of new diesel and gasoline cars by 2040, but the diesel cars would have a role for some years to come. The government announced plans in June to fund projects that will research and test autonomous vehicles on highways and on trials of remote control parking. And one of the companies who has received government funding, of course the government is funding the blueprint, of course it is, because the permanent government is dictating that. The here today, gone tomorrow politicians, you bring a Labour government in Britain, and they'll just follow the same thing, because the permanent government's driving it. We'll get Corbyn in, and then that will change things. Yeah, sure it will. One of the companies that has received government funding is leading a £13 million project to program fleets of autonomous vehicles to drive together between London and Oxford. See, all this drive to electric cars, it's the totalitarian tiptoe moving towards driverless vehicles. The taxi company, Uber, which is kind of taking over the world of taxis, its business plan is not the one it's got now, never was going to be. This is just an intermediate stepping stone again, where they're using drivers and paying them a bloody pittance. Their business plan, Uber, is for driverless taxis. And that's why, despite the fact, as with Amazon when it was developing its monopoly, despite the fact that Uber has been losing money hand over fist year after year. It's been developing its monopoly. So the blueprint has been funding it and funding it, money no object, because the idea is to bring about the driverless taxi world. And then you can start to explain. You can start to explain everything once you realize how this works. This is why we're having smart motorways in Britain. I've been saying this for years and years and years, that this is what's happening. Smart motorways, notice again, smart. What they're doing is they're taking out the emergency lane, what we call in Britain the hard shoulder, where vehicles that break down can get out of the moving traffic, at high speed moving traffic. They're taking them out, making it a running lane. So when you break down, you've got nowhere to escape. And if you break down and the car comes to a stop quickly, and there's something behind you, bang! And this is what's been happening. People have been dying because they've been hit in what would otherwise have been the emergency lane. And as I've been saying, the reason that they're introducing these smart motorways and changing the road system and pouring staggering amounts of money into doing it is not what they're telling you. Oh, it's just to make the roads run smoother. Well, oh really? Have you ever driven on British motorways recently? Especially smart motorways? It's not about that at all. It's about preparing the road system for driverless vehicles. And we've even had, in recent times, the head of Highways England that's running this smart motorway, Insanity, saying that the day will come when only driverless cars will be allowed on the motorways. Oh, really? I am shocked. I never would have sussed that one. So the kind of message of this videocast, really, apart from all that information that's gone before, is that these things are not happening in isolation. There is a blueprint. And once you know what the blueprint is, it's like the phrase I use in the books: know the outcome and you'll see the journey. Know where they want to take us and you'll see the stepping stones to it, which otherwise, without knowing what the outcome is planned to be, would just appear to be a series of random events. So think blueprint and you'll see the journey day after day after day.